It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. We're back live on the big mountain.
Welcome back to the Big Mountain for another first. We're going to try and do some live call-ins on this segment. I know we have a few people that are interested already in calling in. We'll get that number out to you guys here just in a little bit. Before we do that, though, we do want to go over a little bit of an update with the NCAA settlement. And you know what? I didn't bring my notes down, Steve. Do you have your notes?
No.
Okay, we're gonna go off of the top of our brain.
Sounds good.
I had a page of notes, and wait a minute. Maybe I put them over here.
Okay.
Talk for a little bit, Steve.
You talk. Obviously, like we always say, Ross Dellinger, he's the guy to follow for this stuff. So you and I have been following him pretty closely, and there's been a lot of good discourse on X with Immaculate, who I think is going to be calling in later. And we're just kind of at a point right now where the judge basically said what her problems are, with this settlement, and the plaintiffs and the defendants and anyone else had a chance to go ahead and put their rebuttal or file their briefs. I think all of the people who had an objection had a chance to put in a one-page objection, what their objection was. And the plaintiffs and defendants have come back and basically said, we're not going to change much. We think the settlement is good. Well, they changed a few things, but the one big thing, and I'm sure you're going to get to that, is the roster limits. No one seems interested. That seems to be a imperative part of the deal from the NCAA and the Power Four commissioners perspective that
Right.
they're not going to change that. So what do you got?
Yeah, so I did make some notes,
Okay.
which I didn't have. Second time I had to leave set on a live
Yes.
show.
Well, I talked the whole time you were gone. So.
You did awesome. I'm sure you had gobs of good information. But yes, we did get some more information back regarding the attorney's responses to what the judge was asking for. And it's really two main topics that I'm going to focus on. Certainly, if you have, want to call in and talk about this a little bit more, we can. But the one thing was the grandfathering in of or phasing in of the roster limits. The other one was, these parties, these future athletes that are not parties yet to the settlement. So let's start with the grandfathering in.
Yep.
Some of what was said here, that the parties appreciated the athletes, who objected and came there and told their story and things like that. The defendants here, which remember the defendant is the NCAA, have evaluated the court's suggestion regarding this grandfathering in of the roster limits. They discussed it with numerous member institutions, and they informed the plaintiffs there is no practical way to do this because it would have significant disruption. To me, that means, and when they say they had member institutions that they've talked to, a lot of institutions have already started to plan for what was in this settlement. Like they've already done
people. They've already told people you're gone.
They've already done the work. So I think this significant disruption thing is that, work has already been done, maybe prematurely because we don't have a settlement. And the judge could be like, oh, well, you kind of screwed that up. Yeah. I don't think she will, but she could. And I will also say it was said that this part wasn't even talked about in the preliminary hearing.
Right.
So, they went through the preliminary hearing. This wasn't an issue that came up. And, Immaculate had mentioned, which objectors got to her. Clearly, some of them with, the issue of roster limits must have, because it wasn't talked about in the preliminary.
Right.
Members have already started to do things because it wasn't brought up. And here at the final hour, if you want to say, it has. So could it still be done? My opinion is yes, with significant disruption, but it could still be done in my opine. What do you think?
Well, first of all, it wasn't talked about in the preliminary because the preliminary was just between the plaintiffs and the defendants
who already agreed.
Right. It became part of the more of an issue once objectors had a chance, which are student athletes.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's really just a matter of how, if the judges, if she wants to be a stickler on this. I mean, she made it a pretty big issue. And they basically said, no, we don't care.
Right.
We're going to stick to this because this is we've already planned for this. This is how we're already implementing it.
Right.
It's going to cause too much of a disruption. So does she basically roll over and say, okay, all right, you make good point, or
Yeah.
does she hold it up? And we just there's no way to know.
Yeah.
But I will point out, the people that are going to be hurt by this, the cuts and all of that, are the I don't even want to say lowest, but they're the people who have the least to gain. Okay.
Right.
These are the people who are non-scholarship walk-ons or partial scholarships. We're talking track athletes. So we're talking about people who weren't getting very much anyways. They were the real student athletes.
Yes.
The ones that are going to benefit are those people who have that great NIL value.
Sure.
But the people who are going to be hurt the worst are the ones who are just regular student athletes. They're walk-ons. They're getting like 1/10 of a scholarship at the University of Virginia to do track or whatever. And there's a lot of them, and they had their stories. They had a chance to tell their story when they objected as part of the objectors, and the judge really seemed to be swayed on that. But is she going to hold up this massive,
Right.
multi-billion-dollar settlement based on those? So it kind of, if it does go through, it will just continue the trend of the smallest people are the ones who are getting hurt.
Yep. So the second piece, we have another slide. If we could just throw that up quick, it's I think it's the table of contents of this brief. But the other piece was again this issue of the next 10 years of athletes that are not currently in this settlement. This was maybe the item that most hit home to the judge. Again, looking at the reports, that's what it seemed to be. So here's on the screen is what we have from the table of contents here. Of course, there's an introduction, but they talk about here the two main issues there. You see at number 2, it just talks about the roster limits pose no bar to the approval. Again, we went over that. They're saying, yeah, there's nothing that needs to be done. We've already agreed on this. What's the problem? Item number 3 there, plaintiffs have adequately addressed any glitches in the settlement administration process. Item 4, release of the college football playoff is appropriate. And there's a couple more. I know we're going to get that up, but let's get into this other one. So this was the one I think was your biggest sticky wicket in terms of these future athletes. What came out here now, and I'm just going to tell you what was said. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I want to get your opinion on it. But it said there is legal precedent for this sort of thing in terms of these future group of athletes. Plaintiff's attorney Kessler talked about an NFL labor case that I believe he or she was a part of. That case and others have been included in this new filing, saying that there has been legal precedent for these sorts of agreements and settlements. They also pointed out that future class members still have rights, and they are not releasing all of their rights to future damage claims. So I think they're not really addressing her concerns directly. They are saying, hey, we have precedents. Here are the cases why we're able to do this. And these future athletes aren't releasing all of their rights. They could potentially still have claims. What are your thoughts about that?
So I thought it was interesting that they brought up this NFL case as part, because you know what the NFL has that the NCAA doesn't.
Well, they have a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, yes, that is one
thing. Don't they?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
There's a second thing they have.
They have a lot of things. They have owners and they have commissioners, and what else they have, Steve?
They have an antitrust exemption.
Oh, damn.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, which is what the NCAA has been trying to get. So I actually, and I've been thinking about this, I'm going to guess that this item is not going to hold up the settlement, that basically she may let the settlement go, but warn the parties that this may become an issue later, and it may not hold up.
Yes.
This could be challenged later due to antitrust problems.
Yes.
Because basically they're using this settlement to hold current players and future players to a framework and agreement that is basically, when you look at it, it's an easy antitrust case to make. and they don't have an antitrust exemption. There's no CBA. There's none of that.
Right.
So I'm going to guess with this item, she's not going to hold it up, but I think day one, I mean, it's only a matter of time. There are going to be further lawsuits that are going to be attacking this settlement and attacking whatever framework they set up. It's the poison pill,
Right.
in my opinion,
Right.
of the settlement moving forward, and they want to use it for certainty. And I'm not sure it's going to create any certainty because of those reasons, because of those antitrust concerns.
Yeah.
But I don't think she'll hold it up. I think she's more likely the first issue because there's more of that kind of emotional attachment. There's those stories. I mean, they showed one. I think I sent it to you on X.
Yes.
Where the young lady, came and testified in person.
Yes.
And is telling her story. And there's a lot of people that are going to be affected like that. And again, it's the small people. It's
Right.
the people who don't have a lot to gain. There's real student athletes. Which we say we want college sports to be about student athletes.
Right.
Those are the student athletes, and they're the ones that are getting screwed on this whole thing.
Yeah.
The track athletes, the people have 1/10 of a scholarship, the walk-ons, all of that. So I think that's more likely to hold it up. But I think this part, the second part, is more likely to cause problems down the road.
Sure. So that is number one. Our producer's working overtime. He was able to get that all over on the right side. Number one, it talks about that, the 10 years, and you can read it there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But they clearly have tried to address that really without making any changes. Or not really without making, they haven't made any changes.
Right.
They're telling her why this is legal.
Mhm.
And really, so they haven't changed anything. They are like, okay, we hear you. The number one issue, the roster limits, significant disruption, can't do it. We already agreed to it. And number two, we have legal precedents. They're not releasing all of their rights. So we're going to get to callers here in a few minutes. I was at 80-20. I wavered this week when some more information came out on X, and I went, ooh, I might be down to like 60-40 or something because I'm weak, and I just changed my mind like that.
Willy-nilly.
Yeah, well, you kind of got me too. Immaculate said you got him a little bit. And I'm going, ooh, I'm not so sure. But I said 80-20, and so I'll stick with that because I still think it will be. I may be 80-20 is a little heavy, but I still think it's going to be passed. Immaculate on X told me he's still at 70-30. That's what he was when we did our discussion. He was still there after some of the news that came out with these briefs and reportings and all that jazz. Are you still at 50-50?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think mostly because of the concerns from the objectors.
Okay.
Specifically the roster limits, because and I'll say that seemed like the easiest part from the outside view was, let's take care of these walk-ons. Let's just grandfather them in. Why do we need to kick these people off the team?
Right.
And they basically came back and said, no, we're not. It's a non-starter.
Yep.
And I think that holds more emotional attachment.
Right.
That can play on her heartstrings kind of thing. So I'm still 50-50.
Okay. All right. So here we go. Let's get into some. We got a super chat from Kerry Go Knowles. I know he really appreciated our update from yesterday.
Yep.
He's saying, "What's up, fellas? Great job. Thank you, sir." I know he was an advocate of that discussion. And a lot of what you were saying. Of course, I think maybe a lot of our commenters are going to be probably more about that drop yesterday regarding FSU. That's not why we haven't talked about it yet. We want to leave that for our chat with our dwellers. So let me quickly give you the number, and then we'll chat a little bit longer while people can hopefully call in. Here we go. The number, and it's going to be on the screen. 1-646-931-3860 is the number to call in. Again, that'll be on the screen. 1-646-931-3860. Then you'll have to put in the ID and the passcode. And you'll get into a waiting room. I have a waiting room set up, so we don't have people walking on each other, and hopefully I'll be able to know who the heck's calling, at least if not by name, by phone number.
Yeah.
And we'll say hello to some people. And, Steve, real quick, before we get into that, we already have somebody in the waiting room. We'll get to them first. Actually, Genetics is in the waiting room already.
Right. Let's
So
go.
I think he had some things he wants to say. Immaculate told me he also has some things that he wants to talk about based on your update yesterday. He appreciated some of what you had to say. And I saw a lot of comments there. I think, I went back, I re-listen to us sometimes because I feel like I learn how much I screw up so I can not do that again. That's the main reason why. And you actually say a lot of intelligent things, so I like to learn from you. But the way you laid it out was spot on perfect. Like the way you flowed from, the like early on Big Ten, we added FSU, you added Clemson, you went into the Fox Sports and NBC Sports, which circled back to Notre Dame, and then I mean you wove a beautiful blanket.
Well, what was funny
Is that a good analogy? I
yes,
don't
I
know.
think
Anyway,
so. Yeah, or a nice long scarf,
you
something
you
like
you
that.
nailed it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What was funny is afterwards, there were parts where I was like, "This was the big news,"
yeah.
right? And you were like, "No, that wasn't the big news. This was the big
Yeah.
news." So I hopefully our mountain dwellers enjoyed that. There was just there. I didn't think any one piece was really massive, but there was just those little nuggets,
Yeah.
and I wanted to share them. And I'm really interested what genetics and immaculate have to say
Okay.
about that and just in general.
So again, you can call in if you like. First time we're doing this, we hope it goes without any hitches. And if it does, it does. If it doesn't, we'll try again. All right, so I'm going to get into our first one. Genetics is on. I'm going to admit. Hopefully we can hear.
Yeah, hopefully we can
Give
hear
us
him.
1 second. And I got it. How do I? Oh, he's all right. Genetics, are you there?
I am here, sir. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Welcome, sir. You are the first Dweller Discourse, and we appreciate you being the first live caller on the Big Mountain.
It's an honor to be the first individual to do this with you guys.
Well, thanks so much. I know you had a couple things you wanted to talk about. Steve, you want to say hi? Sorry.
Yeah. Just want to say hi. Sorry we couldn't connect earlier, but we were excited to have you on the show. But I know
That's
you got,
okay, Steve. We'll talk later about it because there's some things that I can't say on air that I'll tell you anyway. So, anyways, let's continue.
yeah. So go ahead. I know you're limited time, and the dwellers want to hear from you. So what are your thoughts? Go ahead. You got the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to fill in on a couple of missing gaps. It's not necessarily about the video yesterday. It's just for people to understand what's actually happening. So behind closed doors, and I'm going to start with information that is at the Florida state level. So before all of this started, Florida State already knew that they have a home to go to. That goes back again 2 to 3 years backwards. So they know where they can go. They have an option on the table to take. And one of the things that have been relayed to the employees, I'm not going to mention any specific department because I can't give that away, but it's individuals who deal with communication with alumni. And they were always told over these last couple of years, we have a home to go to. So that's number one. Number two, the Michigan and Ohio State offices are communicating that they want to have a rotation in the state of Florida. Obviously, Florida State is of interest to the Big Ten, so they want to have a rotation. It's going to have to be biannually if we only have one Florida university going to the Big Ten. So we'll have to figure out how that changes from a rivalry protected perspective. So all that stuff will have to get figured out. And the other thing that they're analyzing through people who have the ability to study this information, which is a brand versus brand perspective, what can generate from a TV ratings perspective for a UVA versus a Michigan compared to a Michigan versus a Florida State. That is how they're analyzing and studying things to determine who is of interest as we move forward to the next TV contract and whether or not Florida State moves before the next TV contract. I'm going to avoid that conversation in this call, but I just wanted to provide some background information for y'all to fill in those missing pieces. Florida State did not go into the lawsuit without knowing where they can go. And the reasoning for that is all of the people who have to sign off on that kind of move. It's not just a one or a two or a 30-person decision. It's a multi-department decision. So from a perspective of leadership at a university, why would you go into a lawsuit, run the risk of losing your home, spending $5 million, and then eventually having a settlement without knowing what can be on the end of the result, whether it's a settlement, a win, or a loss. So I just wanted to provide background information on all that stuff. So that's all.
Fantastic, Steve. You have anything follow up there?
I mean, all of that makes a lot of sense, and it's interesting. There's a and I forget his name now. A Skip something. There's a guy on X. He's a Florida State guy. He's very involved with alumni and communications. Boy, he keeps making a lot of trips to Chicago, where the Big Ten headquarters are, and he lets everybody know when he's in Chicago. So just kind of makes me wonder with some of the things Genetics is saying there, if all those are tied in.
Well, Genetics, hey, we thank you for being the first caller on a live show, sir.
Yes, most definitely. So thank you for the opportunity just to chime in here for a quick minute. I could talk about this stuff all day long, but just wanted to give you a couple of tidbits was all.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. I know got a couple other people in the waiting room, so appreciate the info. And yeah, for everybody, we're going to probably try to ask everyone to keep it to maybe 5 minutes, depending on the discussion. So appreciate the call.
Thanks, Genetics.
All right, so we do have another caller here. Let me get them live. All right. Caller, you are muted right now. Area code 404. So if you are calling from area code 404, just unmute your phone. Maybe I have to unmute you. See, this is all new. There we go. Unmuted. How you doing?
Doing good, gentlemen. I've been watching y'all for a while. I do enjoy what y'all been talking about when it comes to realignment stuff. Now, obviously, I've got my questions because I hear things myself. You know, to tell you about myself, you know, I'm from Tennessee and I've got family that are, you know, donors to UT, and they're, you know, they hear a lot of things that are not reported in the media, you know. But talking about this house settlement, that was basically kind of the gist on how this spring portal was going to go. Was I was hearing basically if the house settlement wasn't settled, that this portal cycle, this spring cycle, would just be absolutely insane.
Yeah, and we're already seeing it. You know, it sounds like you're a UT fan, and you know we saw it with the situation with your quarterback. And I agree with you 100%. Basically, you know, if the longer this settlement drags out, and today was the official first day of the spring portal opening, the longer it drags out, the more chance there is to make this cycle the most crazy wild, wild west cycle of the portal with just unlimited money. People want to get, you know, they want to make these transactions and pay these players and get these assets basically before the settlement puts restrictions on. So 100% I agree with what you're saying there. And so we the settlement's not done, and we're at day one of the portal, and I think this is going to be absolute chaos. And maybe this is the point that gets Congress going, because it's going to be, I'm going to say it, it's a shit show.
Yeah.
It is, and there's multiple things that's making it, you know, a shit show right now. You know, all the, you know, national size conferences, you know, where you're hearing reports about, you know, the SEC and Big Ten's want to be like 25 teams and all that. Now, me personally, from things I've heard, I don't see that happening and lasting, because you've got too many giant egos in the way. Like, for example, I'll tell you this. In 10 years, I don't see Texas staying in the SEC. I don't see Oklahoma being there. I don't see Missouri being there. I don't see Arkansas or South Carolina being there. Now, from everything I've heard out of Tallahassee, I know yes, they are trying to get their AAU status, but from everything I've heard for 10 years is that they want to be in the SEC. Like, I don't know why some people are trying to push about them joining the Big Ten. That does not fit to me. To me, the SEC is the answer. And the other thing I keep hearing, you know, everybody keeps talking about Clemson. The things I've always heard is I would be highly shocked if Clemson was to leave the ACC. I think they're pretty fine with being in the ACC. I think it's just more of a money issue. because they do like playing, you know, all their historic rivals like NC State and Wake Forest and all them. But the team I've heard, again, people call me crazy on this, but the team I've always heard, the other one, instead of Clemson, actually, is Georgia Tech, because they've already got a history.
Yeah. So so good. Sorry.
Oh, and I was just going to say, like, you know, and even other things, I can tell you this as well. When I used to work up in Omaha and I got to know a lot of people at Nebraska, I don't think they'll stay in the Big Ten. From what I understood, for people that's wondering what I'm talking about, back in 2020, the Big Ten said that they didn't want to have any football. And Nebraska came out and said, well, hey, you know, let's play Kansas, Missouri, you know, all those old Big 8, Big 12 teams that they had history with. That's right next to them. They said, well, we won't play. And they told them, well, if you do that, then you pretty much forfeit your membership. So they, you know, got quiet and decided to be good boys and not say anything. But then when they added those West Coast schools, they was like, okay, yeah, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Caller, what's your name? I didn't get that.
On Twitter, I go by TriStar on Twitter.
TriStar.
You've probably seen me on there.
Love it. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. You made some good points there. I want to address all those.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yeah. Appreciate the caller. And I know, Steve, you want to comment on some of his comments, so go for it.
So first of all, at Florida State, SEC, and we've heard that a lot, and I think that's the big thing about them wanting to have choices between the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yeah,
I think it's very clear Florida State fans would much rather be in the SEC. We had Doug Rohan on before; he talked about that, and you know just how much nicer it is to drive across the border in Alabama and play Auburn, and you know all of those things. And the fans are probably more of a cultural fit. The thing about it is that Florida, the decision makers, you know, the president of the university, those kind of people, I'm sure they would love an invite to the SEC,
right?
But there's parts of the Big Ten that are very attractive to them. Being in the Big Ten Research Consortium,
yep.
Just the high academics and being a part of that, and the money. Let's face it, the Big Ten, the richest conference. And probably will get richer when they can get, you know, into Florida. So I totally get what he's saying. And I think that definitely is probably the perspective of most. I would say Florida State fans, 80% would probably rather go to the SEC.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, he talked about Georgia Tech. That's a school you and I have talked about many times.
Yeah.
I could definitely see them. I don't think they're one of the top priority targets of the Big Ten, but I definitely could see them being a target. And Nebraska, you know, that's been a prickly relationship ever since they joined the Big Ten. You know, they came in as AAU members, lost it on a technicality. The 2020 COVID situation almost had a chance to blow up the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Even though the richest conference because of the situation. Nebraska, they talked a big game and said, hey, we don't care what the conference says. We're going to go play football.
Right.
And then the Big Ten said, okay, well, you're giving up your Big Ten checks, which are real nice. And Nebraska said, oh, never mind. We're not going to do that. So money talks and BS walks, I think is a good phrase. So I get his perspective, and especially from a fan perspective, and even supporters, boosters, you know, they can have that perspective. But I think sometimes the presidents of the university, the decision makers, they maybe have a bigger picture than just a fan perspective.
Yeah. Appreciate the call. TriStar, a mountain dweller. Fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. We have another caller. Before we get to that, I know we have a David Jurgensen, a DJ super chat, second one of the show, and just want to say hi to everybody. I see we're getting more people coming in, which is awesome. And here, let's take DJ's question, Steve. Do you think in the future that they will, what does that say? My eyes suck.
Itemized media contracts to help guide school payments, like 85% for football. So 85% of the money goes to football players, 10% for basketball, so 10% to basketball players, and so on.
What do you think?
I'm gonna let you take this one first.
Well, I need to ask our producer something.
Okay, all right.
I apologize.
I will talk first.
I want to ask him a question offline.
Yes. So if you could scroll down and leave that question up for me. So yes, I think I definitely see that media partners I think that there's an opportunity for them, especially in the next round of big contracts, to get more involved in how the payouts work. Now, that could be a per team thing where they want to have more say, that they value certain programs more than other programs and they want to make sure they stay. So we could see something like that. We also could see them put in, limits like, okay, hey, if we're paying this much for a football contract, we want every team in the conference to invest this amount of money, a minimum. And we're starting to see some conferences do that.
Yes.
I don't know if that's from input from their media partners or just, organic that started there. But I definitely see, as we see the media partners get the contracts get bigger and bigger, I think their media partners will want to have more of a say in how that money is invested in the program, especially now in an era going forward with revenue share. And so not just that, and I don't know if JOI heard this first part I said, I've heard little inklings that where some of the media partners want to, they're negotiating with the conference, but they also want to almost kind of have side negotiations with specific schools,
Yeah.
where they want to make sure, okay, these 5 schools or whatever are our biggest brands, we want to make sure they're getting paid so that they stay in this conference. So yeah, I think, David, I think it's a good point, and I think as they become more partners, we saw this first with Fox and the Big Ten becoming real partners, and as we see that trend going forward, I think the media partners are going to want to have more of a say in how those big checks they're writing are invested in these programs.
Do you think there's assuming we don't have any sort of legislation that's going to help us, get through some of that, do you think that type of thing's legal where we sit today?
So there are some different interesting laws that go into that, and especially per state.
Yeah.
But I think it's legal to I think it's legal to have input.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll be able to put that into the contract. I can't answer that. And especially there might be certain states who have
Right.
restrictions. We saw in the case of Florida how they have certain laws. So
That's the first thing that comes to my mind anymore is just lawsuit, and we're laymen.
yeah.
We like to think we have education that helps us. We've said this before, but we have a lot of new viewers too.
Yeah.
That helps us understand the laws and business laws specifically.
Yeah.
But we are not attorneys.
Right.
And anything that comes to itemizing a media contract for something like 85% football just leads me, I get the point. Don't get me wrong. I totally get what you're saying,
Yeah.
David. And we may get there.
Yeah.
But we can't get there right now, I don't think, given just the Wild West.
And especially because of the different laws in the different states.
Yes.
We've looked at North Carolina, what they're doing, the state of Florida. Because you could easily see if there was an agreement like this, they could pass a law. Florida could say, no, we're not doing this. You're not going to have a say in this, and they can pass a law. And then if it's not happening in Florida, it's not happening in Texas, it's not going to happen anywhere. Now, one thing where that could change big time is a lot of experts believe that eventually these big time football programs are going to become separate entities from the university, because right now, if they're part of a public university, there are a lot of laws, and the state legislature wants to have oversight of how money is spent and all those kind of things. But if they someday become a separate entity where they're just licensing the university name,
Right.
but they're more of kind of a private entity and not part of that public university,
Right.
you could definitely see that come into play.
Okay, we're going to get to caller area code 503 here in just a minute. David with another super chat, and just to parlay onto what he said, I would think something like this, like we're talking about, might help protect schools on why swimmers are getting Happy Meals and football players are getting, actual good, restaurant steak dinner types of things. Of course, laughing, but yeah, I mean, I that's all part of the problem here, right?
Yes.
Like it's all, I want to say allocated differently, but it's the big boys of the footballs.
Well,
I don't mean big boys literally. Big
Yeah,
boys. I mean the big programs of the football teams.
Well, and we had basically a business model in college sports for the last during our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Where football was the major revenue, bringing in the major revenue, and they were subsidizing all of these other sports.
Yeah.
Well, now with revenue sharing, that just completely changes the whole calculus, because if they were giving 20% of their revenue to other sports before, now they have to give 20% of their revenue to the players. Where do you make up that money that was going to subsidize those other sports? So I mean, it's a strange new world.
Yep.
And I think it's gonna take legislation, and I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I think it's gonna take legislation to really put a long lasting framework that's not gonna get blown up by the courts.
Yep. So we got the call-in number back up there, meeting ID, passcode. We have another caller here. We're going to unmute. Area code 503.
I mean, it's a strange.
Hello?
How you doing?
Howdy. This is Jim. You might know me as GH58.
Oh, yeah. How are you?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Negotiations for the lawsuits for the Pac-12 and Mountain West. What do you think the holdup is on getting them, and do you think some posturing's going on?
That's a great question. Was just actually doing a little digging on that, and I don't want to call it research, but I do think 100% there's posturing going on. And I believe it actually came up in a pod, was it yesterday or the day before? I don't listen to a lot of other shows or anything, but there was a lot of smoke coming out about the new dollar figure, media value figure that's going around the socials of the 12 to 14 million. And I know Canzano had a guest on that was a media consultant, and that's where that came from. But in that pod, it was talked about, is this settlement or lack thereof thus far really being done by the Mountain West to hold that up because of the media deal, and they can't get new I don't say they can't get new members. We absolutely think they can, but if they're shooting for a Memphis, they need more money in order to maybe pay an exit fee or whatnot. And if the settlement's going to allow the Pac to get more money, could there be games being played with that settlement, because it's in, I don't want to say it's in the Mountain West best interest to wait, because they're not targeting Memphis. But I do think, it's an interesting question. I don't know if it's actually happening or not. I mean, mediation, settlement, they take time. But the timing of it right now, I totally get why people are asking that question. And, I don't know if I have a straight answer, but it's an interesting thought. What do you think, Steve?
To me, I think both conferences, their media deals, I think the fact that they don't have their media deals locked in is affecting everything.
Yeah.
Once they get their media deals done, I think then they can settle a lot of other business. Once you know what your revenue stream is going to be, then it puts you in a better position to settle any, litigation you have going on, all those kind of things.
Right.
So to me, and so I don't know if they're actually actively playing games, or posturing, or it's just a matter of there's just so much uncertainty because neither side knows what their media deal is going to be and what their revenue streams are going to be. So they don't know, do we need to fight for some more money?
Right.
So I think that'll be a big part of it.
What does that answer your question there, sir?
I guess. I guess there's really no way to get an answer right now.
Yeah.
Unless somebody comes out. My thoughts is there's some posturing going on. I don't know if it's Gloria or it's Teresa, but I think that there's some type of posturing going on.
It certainly seems that way. But to what degree, and to your point, which side is it even coming from? I'm not really sure. I could be probably talked in either direction on that. People that are
right. I can see positive ways for posturing, reasons for posturing on both sides.
Yes, exactly. And and to Steve's point, I think until at least one of them announces a media deal, the other one's going to come eventually then. But I think that really the first piece is going to be the announcement of a media deal, really for the PAC. I mean, they're going to announce first. I think everybody is well aware of that. We don't know when, but I think that will be the kind of the first shoe to drop, and then everything else is going to fall into place, including, I think, this settlement here. But yeah, I can be talked on, either side of who's posturing on this.
Well, and when you think of,
Do you know when the 60-day stay is going to be over with?
They did that in March, April. It's probably about two or 3 weeks away. We're over halfway, I believe, on that. So yeah, it's coming up quicker than we realize, I think. I don't know the exact date. I need to look at that. That's a great question.
Okay, well, that's all I got.
Okay, appreciate the call, sir.
thanks, JH. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, later.
So I wanted to add to that. Both sides have made promises to their members.
Yes.
As far as monetary compensation for either for people to jump ship or to stay.
Right.
And so I just think that it's hard for them because they don't know yet if they can come through with those promises until they have that media deal. And if the media deal ends up being lower than they thought, they might feel like, well, we need to fight for more money in a settlement one way or the other, either fight to pay more or to pay less, because we made promises and we're going to have to keep them.
We got Go Big Red on. We got DJ David Jurgensen. Of course, always good for a few super chats. We thank you again, DJ. Immaculate's in the chat. Of course, we had Genetics Bill, that college football guy. JEH saying hello. And not only does he say hello in the chat, he says hello on the phone. Aaron, Andy, talking about Sacramento State equals West Coast. And I just want to throw out there, I saw a couple other people. I saw somebody talking NDSU. I'm not sure where that was. I'm just going back up to the chat here real quick. But we had, before we got on live here, we had a conversation with Sam Herder. He follows the FCS very, very closely. We had about a 40-minute conversation with him. We're going to try to get that out tomorrow. We talk about North Dakota State, Tarleton State, Sacramento State. You brought up South Dakota State. We talk about kind of where FCS is right now, a little bit top heavy with some of the top 3 or 4 schools that continually are winning championships. We talk about transfers. We talk about the Mountain West. Talk about all kinds of things.
It was great
Conversation. If you're interested in FCS, any of the schools I mentioned, the Mountain West, you want to make sure you check that out. Hopefully tomorrow. Sargent is on. Who else we got? Day of One, Rob, Kendrick. Appreciate the shout out, Kendrick. Great job, guys. We try to keep it real.
Kendrick is a Clemson Tigers fan. Clemson,
that's right. Gilbert back on. Fresno State, go Dogs. Squeeze money in the house. That's awesome. Excited for the call in. So far, so good. I see we have a few. We're going to get to you guys here in just a second. Just want to say hi to everybody in the chat. We got another Clemson. What does it say? Huffer Billy Paul. Did I say that right? Tu Masta is on. You Can't Stop Me is on. Friends Call Me Sean. Jason Bell. Atomic Skull is back in the house. Wouldn't additions to the Mountain West cut into their media slices at this point? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what the media partner is asking for. I have reason to believe they would really like to see the Mountain West get down into
Texas.
The great state of Texas. I also would love to see a powerhouse program like North Dakota State come in and help, bolster back up the ranks of the Mountain West football schools. Brad Stanton, go Gophers. Stanton.
Was he the one that requested the Gopher
was the one that
coverage?
answered
All right.
the
That was a lot of fun.
Gophers. So good job. Love Muscle back in the house. I think the pack is scrambling. Gloria, I think I've got your number. Calling Gloria. I could start singing, but I'm not.
Gloria.
All right, let's go to, I think these are coming in. I don't know what order these are coming in. I'm going to go to, we got 3 people in the waiting room. Awesome sauce. We're going to go to area code 931. Bless you.
Thank you.
Area code 931. You are coming on the mountain. Welcome, dweller. Oop, let me get him unmuted here. Still muted. How do we get? Uh-oh. I think they're unmuted. There we go. How you doing?
How we doing, gentlemen?
It's Bill, that college football guy.
All right.
Of
Of course. How you doing, gentlemen?
First off, I want to say one thing off the jump. I'm going to be a Penn State Nittany Lions fan later on this year. When Penn State travels to UCLA, I'm going to be enjoying you putting a beat down later this year. And I was wondering from JY's standpoint, because we're talking musical chairs with quarterbacks, and Wyoming has their situation as well, which I'm hoping gets a lot better this year. I was thinking early on that UNLV had a chance of beating UCLA, but now I'm not so sure. If JY had a thought on that.
Yeah, man, there's been so much turnover there. I like to think that what Mullen is doing is going to come together very quickly, but that may be wishful thinking. I certainly would love for them to put a stomping on UCLA. But man, I got to do a lot more research here over the next 3 months on transfers in, transfers out, starters, all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, it's too premature for me to make an educated opinion on that. But of course, being a Midwest guy, I gotta pick UNLV.
I know. It's. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, well, what I was going to say, Bill, was, UNLV, although the turnover, they brought in a really experienced coaching staff. UCLA's coaching staff, I think, still, there were some things last year. I think I don't really have a lot of faith in their coaching staff quite yet. And what I'll say is Nico going there, Nico really benefited with the Vols last year of, a fantastic defense, a solid running game. I like his potential, but honestly, I could see him struggling, especially the first half of the season with UCLA. He struggled at times last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not amazing last year. I think with Nico, it was more about his potential down the road. And I could definitely see him. They play early, right? UNLV, and they play what, week 2?
I don't know which week it is.
Yeah,
but...
like in the first 3 weeks.
Week 2.
Yeah, week 2. I honestly could see UCLA stumbling there, trying to bring in a new high-profile quarterback, all that stuff. I could see it happening. And honestly, I feel good about Penn State going, even though going across the country, they're going to fly out of Harrisburg instead of State College because the runway's too short. I think they're going to go across the country and put a beating on UCLA. I get it from the money perspective, but I really don't. But from the being successful playing quarterback, going from Tennessee, he was in a great position, a great spot. Going to UCLA, I think they're still very much a work in progress. And, the Big Ten, it's not as hard as playing in the SEC from week to week, but it's still not easy. And I think he's going to take some lumps under that coaching staff playing in the Big Ten in his first year. And UCLA does not have that amazing Tennessee defense last year to kind of back him up and make him look a little better.
Oh, I fully understand that. And I'm looking at the UCLA line. I'm like, okay, he is going to be flat on his back looking up at the lights or looking up at the crowd a lot more times than he was before. That really wasn't the point. But this is also a Mountain West bit was I know JY and I have been having fun on X with everybody, as Steve has his into. We have people who come at us at all times from every direction known to man, it seems like. But one post came up that I put up that was actually kind of interesting that I found recently was it's the last thing I'll say on this, the Tennessee fan, because I'm not mad at Nico at all. I'm mad at his dad for the bad way he handled this. I'm not mad at him. The young man's just trying to do his best. I'm not mad at him, and I wish him the best. But the one thing was kind of funny, and I forgot about this. One, I'd forgotten that Josh Heupel was once the offensive coordinator at Utah State in 2015. And it was brought up the fact that of all the quarterbacks he's had since he's been a full-time offensive coordinator in 2015, back with Chucky Keaton, for the Utah State fans who are listening will remember him, Nico was the worst quarterback he's ever had statistically. Utah State quarterbacks are outperforming him by almost 1,000 yards, more touchdowns. So, and the whole situation was him leaving because he wasn't having personnel. But anyway, that's the side. That was the fun part for me. We've all known, and Steve was not Steve, but JY, you've been talking about we heard the story about possibly, rumoredly, allegedly, the Mountain West going after 2 more basketball schools, which was an interesting scenario. And we still don't know anything, at least I haven't heard anything about that having any roots. It's just general inquiries. I was wondering, by the time, let's say 2026 rolls around, do you think they're going to be adding any more schools in the Mountain West, or is this going to be, let's just get cruise control, let's get the conference going, let's get the media deal, and we'll worry about that once everything gets solid?
Yeah, I think they're going to be adding more schools. And I think they're going to add at least one more school for football. And it's interesting, the non-football stuff. We don't follow that as closely. KC's a great follow if you want to follow some of that stuff. So I don't have as much information on that basketball or non-football additions. I think it's interesting. They clearly are willing to do that. They've already done it with 2 schools. And I think my understanding is the media partners that they're talking with have that interest. And we know they're close with CBS, and CBS loves its basketball. So I think that's interesting, that non-football ads, but I do think there's at least one other football ad coming. And as we just said, we talk about that with Sam Herder. He is adamant that North Dakota State's ready to go. They just need the invite. So
yeah, I've been hearing
yeah.
I've been hearing the same thing, and I've been hearing also, I know we brought on this, was that media partners, as you brought it up earlier, they would love to get back into Southern California somehow.
Yes.
And Cal Irvine would be the optimal candidate, and also, crazy as it sounds, San Francisco being one I've been hearing as well. But I've also been hearing, and JY, you broke it, and I give the Big Mountain credit for North Dakota State coming in. I've been hearing it's a lot of smoke showing up from people I've been talking to up there, and also from around other areas, that North Dakota State could be coming in. The Big Mountain was the one who brought up about Tarleton State coming in as a possible full member. I don't know, maybe you have to kick Hawaii in a little bit of money for the travel for the Olympic sports, maybe. I don't know how that works.
Right.
But I thought eventually, the way this is going, it's almost like Gloria wants to make 12 football members and 14 for basketball.
Yeah,
eventually.
It seems like they want to get back to at least the numbers they had. And if they want to go one over that or whatever, it wouldn't surprise me. But I definitely, and we've said it from the beginning when they were looking to rebuild, I don't want to sit if I'm the Pac or the Mountain West, I don't want to sit at 8 football members. I mean, there's no comfort in sitting at 8 football members. So I'm hopeful that both conferences go above 8, and that maybe not for the Pac in year 1. That might be a couple year deal, and Mountain West too. But I think it's far too dangerous right now to sit at 8 football members. So I both think that they'll add more, and I also hope that they add more, because I think it's, like I say, it's too dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Pac-12 might eventually get up to 9 or 10 full members, or maybe just 9 or something eventually. And I also, the whole reason I thought of the 12-14 was everybody knows the whole rumor idea that eventually 2031, maybe UNLV and Air Force leave. But if you get UC Davis as a full member, you get in Tarleton as a full member. With the basketball schools, you go from 12-14 to 10 football, 12 basketball, 8 full members. Gloria's not caught flat-footed, so even if they leave, the Mountain West is still a conference and still whole. But to me, it seemed like she's trying to plan ahead for worst-case scenario. That way, this scrambling does not ever happen again.
Yeah, agree with you. Hey, we appreciate the call. We got a few others waiting, so we'll let you go. Drive safe. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, I'm going to try. Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll see you.
All right, bye.
All right, we're going to go to area code 402. Just make sure you unmute yourself. Area code 402. Give everybody a second to hop on here. We got 2 other people. We do have Immaculate waiting to talk, so we'll get to Immaculate here in just a little bit. And we've got another number in the waiting room as well. Oh, look at that. I could have renamed. Ha! Imagine that. See, we do this and we learn, Steve. We do this and we learn. All right, so let me just do this again. Ask to unmute area code 402. While we're waiting there, let's check out the chat here real quick. What do we got?
Are you there?
There we go. How you doing?
Oh, sorry. I had to hit *6 to unmute.
Well, there you go. Everybody now knows star
Star
six
six.
to unmute, everybody. Appreciate that heads up. How you doing today?
Yep. Doing good. This is David Jorgensen, DJ.
DJ, good to have you call.
Yeah.
Super fan.
And so, hey, you guys know that I really want Florida State to the Big Ten, but I also know their fans seem to be leaning towards the SEC. But if you guys remember, back in the day, Florida State was invited to the SEC, and Bobby Bowden wanted nothing to do with it. So he wanted to be in a conference where Florida State would be one of the big boys, and my thought is, I think Florida State would just blend into the middle of the pack, and I also believe that Florida State's value media-wise is worth more in the Big Ten than they are in the SEC. So I'm hoping the big boys that actually make the decisions go Big Ten direction.
Well, David, again, thanks for being a super fan of the Big Mountain. I'm with you on a lot of the points you make there. First of all, the decision makers, because I agree with you. The fans, I think a lot of the fans, I mean, if you live in the Florida Panhandle, whatever, you want to be playing Alabama and Auburn. I get it, and Georgia and those schools. However, well, the actions we've seen from the decision makers, what they've done to become that big premier flagship public university, the increasing the research. I mean, they are putting so much effort into gaining AAU status, increasing their research capabilities and their numbers, and just expanding. To me, it looks like a school who, now obviously schools want to do a lot of those things just, for other reasons, academic reasons, but to me, all of the efforts they're going through looks like the decision makers want to be in the Big Ten. They want to be that kind of school. Because really, like you pointed out, if they're in the SEC, they're just another program. They're just another school. I mean, they're probably Florida's little brother in that conference, the way Michigan and Michigan State are. And unfortunately, whereas if they go to the Big Ten, like you mentioned, they bring a lot of value. Now, I will tell you, my contacts at Penn State have told me that they believe that the Big Ten and the SEC have completely different targets who they're looking for, and they've told me many times Florida State is the number one target of the Big Ten because of what you said, the media value, adding Florida, the state of Florida, to the Big Ten's footprint adds so much media value. Whereas for the SEC and ESPN, they're already in the state of Florida.
Right.
They have the University of Florida, all the football fans down there. And I know it's 2025, it's not 2010 anymore. So media markets and geography doesn't matter as much, but it still matters. And I think they just bring so much more value to the Big Ten. And what they're doing, the decision makers are doing, seems to align with coming to the Big Ten. Now, on the other hand, I'm sure they would love to have an invitation to both and be able to pick from those are the two premier conferences.
Yep.
And be able to pick from both. But to me, everything just aligns with them wanting to come to the Big Ten and the Big Ten wanting them.
And I'll agree. I mean, I just think there's a lot more value to them. And I agree everything you said, DJ. I think there's more value to them. I think they come in as a more prominent power, if you will, in the Big Ten. And it's not a knock on the Big Ten, but you mentioned it the other day, like the SEC, they're not worried about football right now because every football game's getting good. Not every, but most of them are getting great numbers. So now they're nibbling at the basketball and they're doing a hell of a job with that.
Yep.
And while it benefits FSU to want to, or to have two conferences wanting them, I get why they're doing that.
Yep.
The long game here with the Big Ten, I think, is just beneficial to both sides. So We're all on the same page here, DJ, 100%.
Okay. Hey, thanks for. I'm so glad I was able to call in and such. I thought, oh man, they're going to run out of time. So, but I'll let you guys go. And thanks so much for everything.
Thank you.
Hey, DJ, one last thing. You still there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, we'd love to have you when we get closer to the season and I pick Nebraska this year. You're Go Big Red fan, right?
Oh, definitely through and through. Even though I live in Tennessee.
So we want to hear your thoughts. I'm hoping as we get closer to the season and we pick Nebraska's schedule or whatever, we'd love to have maybe record a little thing with you where we can record your thoughts on Nebraska this year. You can tell us what you think the record's going to be, something like that. But we'll be in touch with you offline.
Okay, that works.
Thanks, DJ.
Have a good one.
Hey, thanks, fellas.
Yep. All right, we've got a couple more calls. We're going to shut it down at this point because we are at the 1 hour mark. I know we've got 3 people in the waiting room. We're going to go right at it. I did want to quickly just mention, I know we had Tyler Steinhaus. I don't know. He's a NDSU guy. If I can see that. Yeah, that's NDSU. Hopefully he heard our shout out that we're going to be talking with Sam Herder here. And we talk about NDSU and their hope of moving to FBS. We have a lot of good information there with them and some others as well. And let's get right to our next caller. So I'm going to go to, let's see, this is 219, area code 219. If this clicks, there we go.
You may have to hit star 6.
We got it. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Wonderful. Welcome to the Big Mountain.
Thank you. Yeah, long-time listeners, first-time callers, so please put me on.
Who
are
we talking
about
to?
The Florida, Zach.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the Florida State thing. I like Florida State joining the Big Ten. You know, I'm a fan of a smaller Big Ten, so getting into not just like the footprint and getting into the media market, but getting into Florida recruiting will be another advantage of the Big Ten. I think we'll want to look into getting. You got California or UCLA, USC. Florida is another big recruiting hotbed, but getting into the state of Florida will also be a good recruiting advantage.
Absolutely. I mean, well, go ahead, Steve. You're the Big Ten guy.
Yeah, I mean, really, the vision for the Big Ten for a while is to be that premier national conference. And like you mentioned, they're already in California. They were not able to get into Texas. I mean, it just didn't work out. But really to complete that step, getting into Florida for so many reasons, recruiting, like you mentioned, the market value, I mean, just everything. And that's why I think we're seeing the Big Ten really target the state of Florida. And we had Genetics on earlier, and he talked about, Michigan and Ohio State, the 2 big boys on the block in the Big Ten. They're the, 2 of the biggest programs historically in the country. And there's been this whole thing of population shifting towards the South. State of Michigan, state of Ohio losing population. And it's no secret that area of the country, Georgia, Florida, the southeast part of the country, it's where a lot of the football talent is. So if we can have, if you're looking at it from the Big Ten's perspective, have your biggest programs, Ohio State, Michigan, maybe throw a Penn State in there, Nebraska, playing in the state of Florida every year. 2 of those programs playing in the state of Florida every year would be absolutely fantastic for the conference, for recruiting, for marketing, for TV. I mean, everything. It's just a win-win. And, that's why the Big Ten is really fighting to get into that state.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought Miami would be in the Big Ten from like a AAU fit, but now with all this happening now, geography and everything like that, AAU doesn't mean as much as it used to be. I see that now a little bit. I know the SEC has 5 AAU schools. Like I see maybe one, like Miami might want to look at there, but I don't think Miami's in a situation right now where the SEC might not be interested in having them join. I know historically they've been, a powerhouse or whatever, but recently they haven't. And I know they wouldn't want to join the Big 12. So Miami's in a very unique situation right now. They're trying to figure out what they can do to stay relevant.
Yeah, and I think Miami could be a backup plan. We talked about that. The number 1 target is Florida State. They're the biggest brand nationally. They bring the most eyeballs. We showed that. We had the graphic not too long ago where we went through the different games and who brings the most eyeballs. And that's what Big Ten's looking to add, is to add eyeballs to football games. So Florida State brings that the most of that, and that's why they're the number one target. But Miami could be, if Florida State ends up going to the SEC, you could look at a package, maybe a Miami and a Clemson together, a Miami and a Georgia Tech,
Right.
Something like that. They could be a backup plan. They're already an AAU university. However, they are a smaller private university, doesn't necessarily fit the prototype of what the Big Ten is looking for, except they are in the state of Florida. They are a pretty good national brand. So they're not out of the running, but they're definitely not one of the favorites, I don't think.
I definitely agree. And I know the SEC, when SEC is looking at expansion, I know they probably won't get just because they got South Carolina, and they're probably going to, kind of complain a little bit why we want to be the only school in South Carolina, just like Texas A&M was when Texas joined. So Clemson is an interesting situation too. They got to try to figure out where they can go as well. I mean, I don't think the SEC is going to want to get Clemson because they're on the state of South Carolina, and you have South Carolina right there in their footprint already. So I don't know what will happen with Clemson. I guess they'll be kind of like in a Miami situation where they're trying to figure out what they can do if they're relevant as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Clemson's interesting. That's one school we have been talking about for a while without much guidance until, again, just, the show yesterday, that the Big Ten is starting to kind of float that. And I question, to your point, if the SEC has real interest in Clemson. But, you got to think for both of these schools, if they're going forward with a lawsuit, they had to have some knowledge of something. Like I'm one of the people that think they didn't just do it hoping that they have a really good outcome so they can get out of the ACC. Just like, somebody's going to want us. Like that to me, that just seems way too far-fetched. So to me, there has to be as we call it, a landing spot for both of these schools. Or I don't see why they would have done what they did.
And sometimes it's not necessarily that they know a conference is interested. They know through back channels and whatever, they know what the TV media partners are interested in them. I think Clemson knows that ESPN values them and the eyeballs they bring. And I think that they know what position, especially now that Tony Petitti, commissioner in the Big Ten, what the Big Ten is looking for, and what and they that data is available. Their branding, their value, the eyeballs they bring. They know all that information, and I think they have a good idea that the media partners value them.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the call.
I just can't see. Oh yeah, no, appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think I made a boo-boo. I think I hung up on someone.
Oh no.
When I was double clicking to get this one on, I think I double clicked another one off.
Oh man.
So if you're in the chat and if you're still on the show, if we hung up on you, please let us know in the chat. And I apologize profusely, but we're going to get to Immaculate. He has been patiently waiting in the chat. I know he has some things to say about our episode yesterday. So we'll go one more caller here. Again, I apologize if I hung up on someone. And then after that, I want to talk real quickly about the PAC. We did talk about that with JEH. Just want to kind of end with that here again. No real news, but we are going to go to the one, the only, the best, this best picture on X.
Avatar, his avatar.
Avatar on X. Immaculate, who was kind enough to join us last week.
Yeah.
For our live show. So we're double dipping here. We got last week and this week. Let me just get him unmuted here. I gotta make sure I don't double click or I'll hang up on him too.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're good. How you doing, Immaculate? Uh-oh.
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
Now we can. How are you, sir?
Good, good. Glad to be back and talking with you guys. Glad to see you guys are doing the call-ins. That was a lot of fun so far.
We will it's our first try and it started out okay. We can do better. But it is what it is, and it's worked out, I think, for the most part, other than me apparently hanging up on somebody. But
you learn as you go.
That's right. And we appreciate you waiting in the waiting room here for a little while.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun just kind of listening to what other people have to say. I mean, you know me, I put a big, huge comment on your video there and kind of what I'm already thinking. And so I wanted to see what other people had to say before I even dared to talk about it. Just also that way, this case, you can just cut me off whenever, because it might go along. But I'm not quite sure how you want to go into this. I'm really kind of jazzed to talk with Steve about some of the stuff that he talked about, but also we've been talking about House settlement stuff. So however you want to work it, but I was going to kind of touch upon a few things of his.
Absolutely. Go with whatever you want to.
I've made a point here, Steve, about the past, about Florida State and events that happened in the past, like with Maryland. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that in terms of, does the way everything aligned from what you're hearing from people, like, was essentially Penn State trying to get Florida State in with Maryland there back in the day? Do you know?
So I can tell you, so I don't know as much. My real solid contact started in a 2020 timeframe. Right after I left the military, I took a job with the state government in Pennsylvania. And during the COVID kind of crisis, I was able to establish some pretty solid contacts at Penn State. And so I don't know really there. What I had heard at that time was Penn State really wanted, UVA, UNC, and that was under the previous, President Eric Barron being there, really high academics, standards and all that. And they were really looking at UVA, UNC, and also Kevin Warren being the commissioner at the time. He really wanted to continue that strategy of moving down the East Coast. So that's what I was hearing at the time. And I'll just tell you, since Tony Petitti has come in as commissioner, he's really brought that TV executive experience, and that's the way he's running it. So I can't really answer prior to 2020 other than I've just seen personally a big change with the Big Ten from going from Kevin Warren to Tony Petitti and what they're looking at, what their strategies are. But I can't really comment, prior.
No worries on that. I just was kind of curious with you on that. That's probably a whole other show type of a situation with going back that far. Some people may not want to even touch upon that. But I mean, I know a lot of people are looking at this situation, and one of the comments you saw of mine was kind of informing people of like, you got to look at this as like an extended negotiation. And people are like, oh, Fox wants Florida State and Clemson's going to happen. It's like, hold your horses. Of course they do. No one's going to argue that there's two brands that are worth more for TV out of that conference in the ACC than FSU and Clemson. So, like, if you're a network and you're starting off your negotiation, that's your extreme value. You're gonna be like, this is what we want. I mean, you're the one going to the conference. But I mean, on your thoughts on that? Do you really think that the way things are in this country now, the things that are going on, that they might actually just go for that and then try to get a more, shall we say, academic business related expansion later? Because to me, that's the case. If you go Florida State and Clemson now, you're committing to 24.
Yeah, I think so. Like you said, everything's a negotiation. And so you have the negotiation of the schools between the conference, but I think there's also a piece there of the negotiation between the conferences. And I think you brought this up one of the times that we had you on, where you said, and maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I believe you said something about you feel like there's already kind of been a deal between the conferences, who they're targeting. And so I think that's part of the negotiation as well. So I can't decide. I've been back and forth. At one point, I really thought when Kevin Warren was the commissioner, I really thought the Big Ten would go to 24. He wanted to bring in the San Francisco market, Cal and Stanford, and go down the East Coast. But now this Tony Petitti, he's a different guy. He's a steely-eyed killer, honestly, when it comes to the business section of this. And from what I understand, and he's pushing it out slowly to the commissioners, or to the presidents, and now the AD, so they can kind of get used to it. But from what I understand, he's just so focused on those media eyeballs, and obviously FSU and Clemson is the the main, they're the main targets out there, adding those eyeballs. But from what I understand as well, he really, really is motivated to getting some kind of a scheduling agreement deal with the SEC. So I think it's like doing that dance with the SEC, not to piss them off too much because they want to be partners. So I honestly, I don't know what to think beyond going to 20 with Florida State being the main target, and maybe and grabbing Clemson or a Georgia Tech or a Miami that can add more eyeballs as well.
Yeah, and that's probably the next best thing to talk about, because I think it's very important. To talk about this scheduling agreement. What I try to get across to people from my perspective is that a lot of this is signaling, right? Like, yeah, they're going to do that at some point in time, but the reason why they're talking about it now is the signal. And what they're signaling is that they are, we'll say, in cahoots just for fun, but seriously, like, they have decided we're going to do better if we work together. And I think that Petiti is the reason for that, because him and Sankey are two very different guys. They're not butting heads in the same thing. They kind of mix very well, because where Petiti is strong, Sankey is not as strong. And where Sankey is very strong, Petiti has not experienced. So I think that they're a really good pair. And I try to get to people like, this isn't like, the P2, they're leaving everyone kind of stuff. It's just, we're going to go in this direction. And if you guys want to come with, that's cool. We're the A4. Come on with. But I feel like that's probably going to be the storyline of this. And you said that big time. And that I don't think they even want the same stuff. Like, people say, well, they're not going to let them get Florida State. That's changed. Florida State value to the SEC is not the same as it is to the Big Ten. It's just not. Like, you're surrounded by Alabama, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, LSU, now Ole Miss. Like, it's like Florida State's going to do good, and they're a threat. And that's actually not a good thing to a lot of those schools. Like, they already carry it. Whereas if you put them in the Big Ten, and you're going to have this scheduling agreement that's going to be in the first part of the season, when we're going to have conference playoffs. These OSC games are not going to hurt your postseason. They're going to be big-time exhibition games early in the season when everyone's just hungry for college football. We don't care. Like, just give us, big games. And, it's a bonus that they don't harm you for your postseason, because we get it. That team is not the same as the team at the end of the season. So I think Florida State against Florida is a game that always happens. And then you also have an SEC challenge game. And so if you come with, like, say, me, I'm going to say Georgia Tech. So if you have a game against Georgia Tech, you have a game against Florida, and then you have one more game against an SEC team, even the value is better for the SEC. Like, they're not coming there. They're not going to shake the trough, so to speak, but you're still going to get them like 2 times a year. So I don't really see a loss.
Yeah, and I'm the outsider here, but I agree with you and what Steve said. I think that scheduling agreement, if and when it happens, is elevating, both of these conferences to a whole nother level of viewership. And for all the points that you just mentioned there, the safety of it, if with the audit bids and things like that, if Florida State joins the SEC, that's just another conference game, right? Like, that there's not necessarily a special build-up. That if they're not in the SEC, then you are able to get the Florida State, SEC versus Big Ten. Then you can still do the matchups. Everything you just said there is of greater benefit to both conferences.
Yes.
Than if FSU goes to the SEC. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean FSU doesn't go to the ACC, but when you step back and look at it big picture, and I'm not the Big Ten guy, I can see exactly what you're saying, and that elevates both of their values. And if there's one thing I've learned, Sankey's pretty daggone good at elevating the SEC's value. So, that's an outsider's, if you will, point of view there.
JY's really excited for when the SEC adds, let's say, UNC and Duke, and then they get 16 teams in the tournament every year. He's really looking forward to that.
That's what they want to do. There's 8 more spots in the tournament every year, and they only had 2 teams that didn't get in. So they're expanding with basketball teams. Like, that's the plan. They don't need to throw the football hierarchy off anymore. So you look at every single school that they're angled with. They all have basketball. And I see you're about ready to say something. I'm going to say this and then go, Steve, but Kansas. Kansas. And I've mentioned this to you guys, and people have been kind of pooing on that. And whenever people poo on that, I just say GT. People used to poo on that too, and now people kind of get it. It's one of those where they have a special value for the SEC if they decide to go that route. And if they need that +1 that they can't quite figure out, watch out.
Yeah, great point. I was honestly a little shocked when my contact brought them up and was saying like people are not paying attention enough to Kansas. But going back to your point about basketball, and I remember you were one of the first people that was really pushing that on Twitter, X, about the SEC and what they were doing and building the basketball, because that's where they could add value. They'd already kind of maximized their value with football.
For sure.
And it, when I read those tweets of yours, it made it click to me, because my contact had kept telling me for a year or two that that the SEC and the Big Ten were not looking at the same targets. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Like, the targets are obvious. Florida State and Clemson. I mean, it's football, or two top football programs. And then it really, and they were kind of cryptic about it. But it makes so much more sense with the context that you were able to add with the basketball stuff. And really, we've seen the fruits of that labor from the SEC, and the money that's the shares that they get from that basketball term. I mean, it's not chump change. We always talk about football revenue being so much higher than basketball,
Right.
but boy, oh boy, you get 14 teams into the tournament and get a bunch of them into the Final Four, Elite Eight, and all that. You can really bring in some revenue, and like both of you have said, Sankey has almost maximized that revenue at this point.
They brought in over $70 million just from taking part in that tournament. Now, that still doesn't match up with football postseason money, because that's kind of what you get from what they got from participation in the CFP. Plus, then there's the money that's divvied out. But that's big money. And when you start to look at that, it's like, this is how we're going to, get that extra little bit to pay these players that we're trying to figure out, right? When you're taking another, what did it come down to? I think it was about $5 million a school. That's your quarterback.
Yeah.
That's something like that, and that's that extra little bit you're trying to figure out. And as you said, the SEC just doesn't have to worry about football. We're Big Ten guys, we're proud guys about it, but it's just the way it is. Like, they had one less team in there last season, and does it matter? No.
Right.
Their viewership won't go down a bit, and that's all that matters in business. They are a regional brand that has a national following, and that's why they're not going to challenge that by going outside of that. I think he's right. Don't mess with it. Don't mess with that concoction that they have there. And so, they can just get some regional teams that all have basketball and roll with it, right?
Yep. I want to hear, Immaculate, your thoughts. And I know we've been talking mostly about the expansion stuff, but we're at almost a critical juncture here with the House settlement. We don't know what the judge is going to say based on these new filings. You've been following very closely the stuff going on at Congress, with the Senate committee hearings and all that kind of stuff. So you just want to kind of give us your updated thoughts, where you feel right now we're at, and should I be more optimistic about Congress coming in and fixing college football?
Congress, yes. The House settlement, maybe not. One thing I didn't quite get into before we talked about this was just how much Congress was talked about at the House settlement hearing. And, Attorney Berman, who's one of the main attorneys for the plaintiffs, he seemed pretty shook up about it when he realized that this thing wasn't going to go through. And the one thing he was worried about was that Congress was actually going to pass something before they could even get this finalized. And for an attorney in a class action case, that means you don't get paid. So, but that's a real fear, right? And that's a guy that knows. And, and then when we saw what happened on the Hill, with that day on the Hill, where all the commissioners went and met with the main five guys, who wasn't there? The president of the NCAA. I mentioned this. This was the A4 kind of planting their flag.
Yeah.
And it was. This was those 4 commissioners meeting with the 5 guys that are running this. And then on top of that, they set up a strategic hit where basically every other senator was having a group of people from their state. You know, we're talking ADs from the schools, and the picture I saw was Texas, where they had the AD, head football coach, basketball coach. I think that women's basketball coach and a couple players. So you've got these folks coming into your office and talking to you about how much they need this. I know it's politics and guys are going to have their positions, but to some degree, that's got to be a bit moving. Of like, okay, we'll work on something, and they hit everyone at the same time. So to me, I was impressed with the complexity of it, and then confused by how little coverage there was of it afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, how can you have something this big be this shadowed?
Yeah, it seems like the media is so focused on the House settlement. It's like they can only focus on one shiny object at a time.
There's a little sleight of hand.
Yeah, exactly. And the P4 went in there with a power move in DC.
Yeah. So like I said, I've been calling that inevitable. I call this a too big to fail situation. And people are like, oh, it's Congress, won't happen. Like the group of 5 that's leading this is 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So people, when they want to talk about, oh, partisan politics will stop it, I don't think so. I think neither side wants to be the side that gets left behind on this.
Yeah.
Neither side doesn't want to have influence with the NCAA, with the universities, with what goes on at universities. It's just one of those plays where it's going to be something down the middle. And I think that's likely to happen. And I think that probably actually pushes House to get finalized. I do. I don't think that she came all this way to have this thing not go.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I said they'll probably get away with the hard line on roster size, as long as they do some other stuff that she wants. Like, she could have stopped this at preliminary, and she didn't. And I think maybe, as you remarked, there was some objectors, I think, that maybe kind of caught her a little bit.
Yeah.
And she at least wanted to show some empathy to it, if nothing else, because like I said, she's the authority connected to all these cases. So history is going to go down on this. And I think maybe she wanted to show at least that she was empathetic towards it. Maybe that doesn't count for much, but when you're the person in that chair, it does.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I still think it's going to happen. The 30% chance of it not happening is, crazy as it may sound, is because Congress may act faster.
Very good. Well, hey, appreciate you calling back in, sir.
Absolutely, man. I know I went a little bit long with you guys, and it's always fun to talk with you. So look forward to doing it again.
Sounds good. Have a good evening.
All right, guys. Take care.
All right. I got a couple quick commenters I want to hit. We are almost done with the show here. I'd want to hit the pack here real quick. I saw Brett Taylor was talking about the value of the nationwide brand that came up in some of our conversations. I wanted to give him a shout out because he was texting it as we were kind of or commenting on it as we were talking about it here with some of our call-ins. Tyler asking about tell him more about North Dakota State because I want to hear about it. We get into it tomorrow, or well, we got into it with Sam Herder. He thinks they're ready to go. Just need the right invite, and you'll hear him talk about that here. If I can get that produced tonight, we'll get it out tomorrow. That's my goal. He was kind enough. He gave us about 40 minutes. Paul's a great guy, always commenting on our shows. Appreciate your nice comments, Paul. We do our best to stay honest, keep it real. And we're not here for the clicks. We're just here for these awesome discussions with everyone. So we appreciate the phone ins. I thought there was one more. You have one?
Well, someone mentions about any chance Cal and Stanford might get another look at the Big Ten. Not as long as Tony Petitti is the commissioner. No.
Squeeze money, appreciate it. So last thing with the Pac-12, and again, I put this on here not knowing if we'd get a caller about the Pac-12, but of course, our buddy JEH calls in and talks about the Pac-12. It was great. We had some of our longtime dwellers call in, so they made sure we had enough calls. It actually worked out perfectly. We didn't have people waiting for too long. So it was good. And unfortunately, I think I hung up on some.
We had JEH, we had Bill, that college football guy, and we had David
DJ.
Jorgensen. I mean, whew, all stars.
They are some of the premier dwellers, and we had a lot of other ones in the chat too, which is awesome. So the PAC community, as I said, I just wanted to, I'll bring it back up. We talked about it briefly with JEH. I listened to the pod where I can't remember the guy's name, Klask or something like that. He was a former Fox administrator, or not administrator, former Fox executive. I think he was a senior VP or something like that. And he had worked with the PAC in the past. He now has his own consulting firm, as they all seem to do, because that's what you do when you retire.
Gotta make that money.
You got to do something. And he, works with, according to his little bio, with conferences and and schools and blah 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 blah. So he's the typical consultant stuff. I listened to the interview. I thought he did a nice job. And what the big talking point that came out of it that I've seen go ablaze on the socials was he put a value of 12 to 14 and he even said 15 wouldn't surprise me, but he caveated that around it depends on who their eighth member is. And I went, it's interesting that he says that, because everything we've heard, we haven't heard a lot, but the one thing that we've heard that I have always deemed to be true is that the PAC has been told it doesn't matter who your eighth member is. Well, this guy's saying, well, it does. And I think it does. And then he went on to say his top two are Memphis and UNLV. Well, I would agree. If Memphis is their eighth ad, that does matter. But I think we all can agree at this point that I don't think they're going to be the eighth member. They may be a member in the future, but again, unlikely that Memphis is going to be that eighth member, which doesn't lead them to a $15 million media deal. That's my opinion. I could be totally wrong. JY could be eating crow here in about 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whenever the damn announcement comes out. I just don't see that being realistic. And there's a lot of smoke this week because of that pod and the number consultant, in his opinion, put on the PAC. And I'm not here to crap on the PAC. I'm just saying it was an off the cuff comment. It was at the end of the pod. And I don't even think Canzano really forced the guy to say anything. He really didn't. They were just having a discussion and it came up. And so, it could happen. It could happen. I don't think with people pointing to that pod being the authority of where 1214 is coming from, I don't think it's fair to that guy. I don't think he was being that authoritative about it. It was just an opinion that he was putting out there on a Canzano podcast. That's what I got out of it. You probably didn't listen to it, but
I did not. But yeah, it sounds like a guy who was shooting from the hip.
It was just talking. It was a talking point. It wasn't. So
take it with a grain of salt.
My DMs lit up today. I got a lot of interesting information, and I appreciate that. Some about the PAC, some about additions and all that kind of stuff. At this point, everything we have said still stands. I'm not changing any of that. I still see Texas State as by far the most likely eighth member. And my range is 8 to 10. If they can go above 10, good on them. I'll happily eat crow for the PAC if they get 11, 12, $13 million. I'll happily eat crow. My opinion is they won't get it. Oh, we got Matt Ritz and he's back. ESPN Today, Troy Taylor lawsuits.
How about I comment on that and then we end it?
All right. Gilbert's with me. 8 to 10, he thinks. Bill, it's Canzano. Next question. You went there. I didn't. Yeah. All right. We're going to comment on Matt and then we're going to end it. Go for it.
Okay. So I didn't see the report necessarily about the lawsuit, but I did see Troy Taylor's statement. And basically what he's saying is, hey, there were investigations and I was cleared of any wrongdoing. I didn't do anything wrong. So the school is in the wrong to fire me for cause. It's a he said, she said. I'm sure it's going to go to a lawsuit. We saw Michigan State, all that stuff. That was pretty well documented. But we've seen even Northwestern with Pat Fitzgerald, where he's fighting it. And it looks like he may win either win the case or get a pretty decent settlement.
Yeah.
So my expectation with this, schools use this a lot when there's some kind of minor wrongdoing and they already maybe have an inkling that they want to get rid of that coach. They basically try to fire them for cause. to save some money. And if their case is good enough, then they'll win.
Yep.
If their case is not quite strong enough, then they'll probably settle.
Yep.
And he'll get some money, not as much money that was guaranteed in his contract, but that's the most likely thing to happen. And honestly, the allegations I read, they're kind of silly. Like they're nowhere in the level that we saw. Definitely not at Michigan State,
Right.
or even in Stanford has a very high. They hold themselves to a high standard, allegedly, but they did get in trouble for the SAT scandal and all
Right.
that kind of stuff. But when I saw, well, at least in his statement, what those investigations were, if those were the investigations, it's a pretty weak case against them. So I think there'll probably be some kind of settlement, and that's all. That's the only thought I have.
Agreed. It's always settlements. Same deal. I'm out. Since I'm the Mountain West guy, I'm going to bring up Anderson and USU. He was fired right before the season last year. Yada yada yada. And I'm not going to get into who's right and who's wrong, but when you fire somebody like that, there's going to be a pissing match about whether it was with cause, without cause. Then you have a lawsuit. Then you have a settlement. He gets something for it. She gets something for it, and you move on. That's just the way it usually goes in employment law.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, that is our first call-in episode. We're not going to do this every week because we'll have other things that, this was a lighter week in terms of our agenda that we wanted to go over. It worked out pretty well. We would shout out to the producer for helping us. Shout out to everybody in the chat, all the call-ins that we had. And we have a lot of people viewing us here this evening. As I said, we have a nice discussion with Sam Herder tomorrow. If you're an FCS fan, or as I said, if you're a Mountain West fan, we get into that as well. So make sure you check that out. He's a super intelligent guy. He's a good follow on X too, just to follow anything FCS related. So, hey, with that, again, we thank all of our dwellers for watching. We'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.